welcome to Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And a lot on the agenda. We'll start with, the thing that scares me, even though it's New York City and DiBlasio and the liberals that control that once fine city. I'm wondering if it's not a playbook for the National Democratic Party, and that is giving voting rights to non-citizens, which I still believe might be unconstitutional, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, they're pushing that through in New York City. It's limited voting rights because they can't do it for any statewide or federal election. It's just for city elections. I don't think it's going to survive a court challenge, though.
Yeah, but I think the only reason I really bring it up, if it's New York City, it's always going to be Democratic anyway, although there's some interesting news that we'll talk about later. But I wonder if it's not, I think it's something the National Democratic Party is just chomping at the bit for them to some way, somehow put into action.
I'm sure they are. And that's probably a lot of what went into the thinking when they were pushing for federal control of the elections. However, elections are all controlled by the states and the municipalities. So the federal government can't do this nationally. And I'm willing to bet that most of the country would not put this through on a local level. I could see it going through in New York City. I could see it going through all up and down the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington. But I don't think it's going to be able to survive a court challenge. And something like this will have to go through a court challenge.
And I agree with you. And I also, just like what's been going on for the last 2 years, I think it would be another, I don't know if it's a death by 1,000 cuts or massive blows at this point, but I think it would be another wake-up call for middle America, suburbanites who, help push Biden along, that, okay, this is just a bridge too far. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're already starting to see suburbanites turn on him. We saw what happened in the Virginia and New Jersey gubernatorial elections. Folks that reliably went Democrat, that went for Biden over Trump, have turned their back on the Democratic Party because they've gone too far to the left, and that's not what people elected him for.
Agreed 100%, and I think this would just be more fuel on the fire. Speaking of fuel on the fire, it really is. I do have a good sense of humor, even in my advanced age. And the Kamala Biden, it's like almost Abbott and Costello. It's a great comedy routine. And, when she's on camera, she doesn't have dementia, but she's no brighter than Mr. Biden. But supposedly she's, again, this doesn't surprise me with liberals, the face of her is, she's always concerned, she's compassionate, la-da-la-la-da. But behind closed doors, she's supposed to be very ruthless, condescending, and something was soul snatching in terms of her methodology, her management style. But because of that and probably other reasons, there's been staff exoduses and dissent.
Yeah, I mean, her former staffers have not been keeping it a secret what they think of her. And there was a quote from one former staffer who said, "It's clear that you're not working with somebody who is willing to do the prep and the work. With Kamala, you have to put up with constant amount of soul-destroying criticism."
That's it, yeah.
And also her own lack of confidence. So you're constantly sort of propping up a bully, and it's not really clear why. This was a direct quote from her staff.
Oh yeah, no, I believe it, and it's very evident that she is lazy in terms of prepper. I've seen her on a couple of interviews lately, and you could get someone off the street, and they'd be more. I mean, she's a vice president of the United States. It's funny and shocking.
But I don't know if it's funny. I think it's kind of scary. But I think the Democrats knew that these accusations were coming, that she did not want to do the prep work, because it was only about 2 weeks ago that they leaked information from the intelligence people saying, who were saying, oh, it was impossible to prep Trump. He didn't want to hear it. I find it very suspicious that that came out at the same time that Kamala's staffers were saying that about her.
Yeah, just a coincidence. No coincidence is the vaccine mandate. DiBlasio may be the worst mayor in the history of maybe the universe, except that there's a parallel universe. That's not going to hold up in court either, is it?
It doesn't look like it would. I mean, so far, every one of Joe Biden's vaccine mandates have been struck down by the courts. As far as I can tell from these existing court decisions, mandates have to come from Congress. And I think using emergency powers, a mayor can do this if he's doing it for city workers. DiBlasio went a step too far, mandating it for private citizens and the private sector. And I don't think that's going to survive a court challenge. And I'm not even sure it's going to have to, because he's a lame duck. He leaves office in a month.
Yeah, it's just working his magic in his final stages. And if it ever did hold up, just one more reason for companies to relocate in New York City. That's a joke.
I don't think he cares if it holds up. He didn't do it to have a mandate. He didn't do it because he cares about COVID or vaccines. This was his way of going further to the left than the current governor of New York, because DiBlasio has said he wants to run for governor, and he is courting the liberal left. Well, guess what? The liberal left doesn't hold much sway in upstate New York and outside of New York City. So doing this, he's basically putting an end to his political career. But that's the real reason he did it, to court the left for a gubernatorial run.
I'm sure, but the arrogance. Okay, most grounded people know their limits. I know my limits. You know your limits. The arrogance of this moron who never worked a day in his life, thinking he could run New York and get elected.
Well, he got elected twice.
No, I mean not New York. I mean the actual state.
Oh, no, there's no way he could be elected as governor of New York State, because the rest of the state sees what a disaster he made of New York City. He literally destroyed the city. He destroyed it economically. He killed the transit system. Crime has shot up, and there's a lot of talk about crime going up nationally. He beat them to the punch, because crime was going up in New York for his entire session as mayor. It had nothing to do with COVID. It predated COVID. They have a huge homelessness problem. It's basically the same situation as San Francisco. The two cities were just plummeting.
Yeah, no question about it. But in the topic of arrogance, I thought it was funny that he thinks he can actually win the governorship, the gubernatorial race in New York, but he also thought, or at least I assume he thought, that he could be president of the United States. He literally, I'll go out on a limb, would make Biden look like George Washington.
Honestly, I don't know if he could. He might even be worse than Biden, given the results of what he's done in New York. But yeah, he had been looking at presidential run for 2020, and he pulled out when he realized nobody was going to vote for him. In polling, even New York City didn't go his way.
Yeah, I thought that was hysterical. Also, speaking of the vax mandate, though, I heard and read an article by physicians that were squelched, I should say, at the beginning, saying that yes, vaccines, that was all good, but this whole quarantining and isolation, we would have been better off, and I'll put it in quotations, to live with the virus, because all these draconian initiatives really set things back, not advance.
Yes, they're absolutely correct. I've heard literally hundreds of doctors saying this. The problem is our immune systems only work when they're exposed to bacteria, when they're exposed to viruses. So, by keeping everybody in lockdown, by insisting on wearing the masks, we have stopped our immune systems from being exposed. And it's not just to COVID, it's to the flu virus, it's to the common cold. We have literally weakened our immune systems by inhibiting what it's being exposed to. And now you're seeing, yes, we've seen many studies, a lot of them coming out of Israel, which physicians all over the world have said these have been the gold standard of studies, saying that natural immunity, the immunity you get when you're exposed to the virus, is 13 times greater than what the vaccine delivers. And that's the vaccine at its most potent. We've already seen that the vaccine immunity fades over time.
Exactly, and that's a whole theory. Again, it didn't fit an agenda, and I don't think the agenda is really about protecting us. It's about control. If the Democrats have it their way, I should say, it would be mask mandates forever. I mean, it shows. I mean, it gave them real clues and how easily and how, except for certain sectors of our society, that we went marching to their tune.
Well, COVID was incredibly good for the Democrats. I mean, let's face it, if it weren't for COVID, the odds are Trump would have won the 2020 election. If you listen to Biden and Jen Psaki, anything they are asked about, what's causing the crime rate, what's causing the supply chain problems, they blame everything on COVID. If COVID goes away, they have to accept the fact that they're the problem and not the solution.
100% agree. Speaking of a problem and someone who was never the solution, Chrissy Cuomo fired from CNN. He was suspended. Now he's fired. The book deal has been pulled. Oh boy, I'm sure people were lining up to read that. They're right up there with Tolstoy. And there's also ramifications for Jeff Zucker. On the ramifications for Jeff Zucker, I believe with the new Discovery merger or acquisition, they're looking to get rid of this ass.
Oh,
he's incompetent. He's a complete.
I'm sure they are. I mean, their ownership is looking at the ratings plummeting. I mean, this wasn't just a drop. This went off a cliff. And, we spoke about this last week. John Malone, one of the major owners of the company, said CNN has no actual journalists. It's very clear that he wants to make changes. So I'm sure that factored into the firing of Cuomo. I don't think Jeff Zucker is going to survive this. And
but something that's bigger than ratings. Ratings, obviously, feed the people, right? But it's also about brand identity. That's oftentimes more impactful and long lasting. You have a company, Nike, that could have a bad, quarter, a bad year, whatever. Okay, I'm not dismissing that, but their brand identity is forever soiled, and that's going to take years to correct.
It's going to take years, but I'm going to disagree with you a bit about the brand identity. Yes, CNN's brand is in the toilet, but media branding is not what it used to be. I mean, remember, A&E was arts and entertainment. It hasn't been that for a long time. Bravo was a theatrical network. It hasn't been that for a long time. It's been garbage reality shows. Brands for networks don't have a long-lasting appeal for some reason. They change them, based on ratings, based on how they can get viewers. So I think this is really more about the ratings for the new company than anything else. They need those
I
ratings
just
to
have to
go
say
up.
one thing about, I'm sorry, about the branding. A lot of those like A&E and everything, that the reason why that happened was because major networks bought them up just to get rid of competition. Really didn't give a shit if they did well or not. They just wanted cheap bullshit programming like Kardashians, all this other crap. I'm going to have to say CNN did have a brand identity of the leader in news, or whatever you want to
Well,
call it. The
no,
place
they
you go to during a crisis. That's because of
no,
Zucker
they
and his
they
other
haven't
idiots, it's gone.
they haven't had that brand for a long time. When Jeff Zucker came in, and he's been in for a while, he took that brand away when they started putting Anthony Bourdain on in prime time. They got away from news. So that source for news, that's been long gone even before the ratings fell.
I know, but that's why I'm saying it's a perfect storm. If you had a strong brand identity, the source of news, I forgot. It's so irrelevant now. I don't even remember it. But it was the go-to network. If there's a crisis, you go to see it. They, as we were talking about, they have no journalists. Even Anderson Cooper, he has all this erudite look with the glasses, and he is one of the shittiest interviewers. He didn't ask any tough questions of Biden. He sucks with follow up whenever whoever he's interviewing. So they have. What are you going to watch? What's Don Lemon? Oh God, a brilliant Mensa candidate. Yeah, okay.
Well, and
Yeah,
again, it all goes back to John Malone's comment that they have no journalists. They haven't been a news station for a long time. Can Discovery turn that around and turn them into a news station? Yes, they can, but you're going to see heads roll to do it.
Oh no, I think if you're on the CNN bus, you're going to be soon thrown under that bus because the ratings suck, and it's not just because I lean conservative. It's just unwatchable TV. Don Lemon, you really need his insights, Dr. Lotkin? I'd rather talk to like a carnival barker.
I happened to see show by show ratings yesterday, and of the top 25 cable shows for the news networks, Fox had 20 of them. CNN managed to get 5 in. MSNBC didn't crack the top 25. So you're talking about a combined viewership between CNN and MSNBC for a cable network of virtually nothing. Neither one of those networks has a show that cracked 1 million viewers. So
which is
I
actually
think
obviously nothing.
Yeah, if CNN wants to become a news channel again, they're going to have to basically get rid of everybody and start from the ground up. If MSNBC wants to do it, the same thing. They would have to fire everybody. The difference is, I think MSNBC is more about the liberal bullshit than it is news ratings, because unlike CNN, MSNBC is actually part of a much larger company.
Yeah, and they don't claim to be real news. I mean, Rachel Maddow, her following is completely based on nutcases. I have no idea, but that's another issue.
Right.
So
that was decided in a court of law.
I love that one. That's the greatest ever. That's the greatest. That someone sued because it was misinformation. The judge said, "Wait a second, it is no misinformation," because anyone who watched the shows know it's half of it's created. Very interesting. The Maxwell trial is continuing. I think there'll be some fallout from that. There was a rumor. It was only a rumor on the net about Bill filing for divorce against Hillary. I don't think it's true. I did when I first heard it, and I thought, wow, my conspiracy mind went off that maybe they're doing preemptive action in case he gets sued so they can protect some of their assets. I wouldn't put it beyond the but
I think if that were to happen, I think it would be the other way, because Bill was the one who is really connected to Jeffrey Epstein. So I think it would be Hillary divorcing Bill, not the other way around.
True. I don't think it's true anyway, but
Yeah,
I think there's going to be fallout. We'll see what happens. The Omicron variant of COVID, a lot more transmittable, but a lot less lethal. And even Bill Gates predicted, not that you hang on, what he has to say, not a medical doctor, thinks the pandemic will ebb in 2022.
Yeah, they're starting to say the Omicron variant may actually be the best thing that's happened
Yes.
to us because it is very contagious, but very mild, which means more people will be getting natural immunity because they will have been exposed to it. Even if you've been vaccinated, being exposed to it boosts your immunity to it. So Omicron may be the death knell for COVID because it may give most people herd immunity.
And what is Fauci going to do without the stage that he so enjoyed later in life?
Fauci is going to retire, and he's going to write books, and he's going to basically coast off into the sunset with his reputation at its highest point before anybody can come down and nail his ass to the wall.
Agreed 100%. So they had the Jesse Smollett trial. Shocking to me. My read on it, I've never watched Empire. I don't really know too much about him. I'd have to say not exactly a Mensa candidate. And I believe he talked himself in terms of testifying, into more trouble. And it's interesting that Black Lives Matter couldn't waste the opportunity to blame it on something like white misinformation or some crap, or white police misinformation. It's on video, dude. Hello.
Right. They have the attack on the alleged attack on video. They also have the practice run for the attack on video. On top of that, they have the personal check of Jussie Smollett written out to the attackers. And now he tried to whitewash that. Oh, he paid for personal training from them. Really? And then they attacked him. And of course, his accomplices have been testifying against him, and they said, yeah, they don't charge that much for personal training. It was far beyond that. I think that the big takeaway from this case is, one, don't practice your crime in front of a camera, and two,
probably not a good thing.
Don't write personal checks to your accomplices.
No, but again, I don't think he's exactly a Ivy League grad. And I'll say there's a third takeaway. The liberal media, it fit their agenda, MAGA, white racism, which has been fixated on for the last 4 years, even though it hardly exists in America today. It exists in some circles. I mean, I'm not naive, but not in large measure. And where was the due diligence? He was on some interviews, and in one interview, his interviewer was crying with him. I mean,
yeah,
don't you look at the video? Don't you look at this shit before you start aligning yourself with a moron?
No, the media saw this fit their narrative, which is why he staged it this way, because he knew that the media would run with it and he would get publicity from it. But you'll notice a lot of the same news people who were in his corner and were talking about how horrific this was, they have not been covering the trial. They have been radio silent because the truth came out, like the Trump collusion story, like so much, like the Hunter Biden laptop. They crushed stories and promoted others to fit their agenda, and now facts are coming out, and it turns out that we don't have journalists in this country.
And that's why it cracks me up when you see, people like Anderson Cooper, and he looks the part, and others MSN. They're so intent and they look so sincere, and it's a bunch of crap because anyone would have to at least look at this before you went full bore. Completely ridiculous.
Well, even even if you wanted to believe the story, okay, let's take a good look at what the original claim was. It was 2 in the morning. It was about 20 below, and he was out going to Subway for a sandwich when he
Sure,
was
happens all the time.
attacked.
I do that when
Right.
during blizzards. I go out to
Sure.
Subway when it's 30 below
When he
zero. Sure.
right, when he was attacked by two African Americans wearing MAGA hats. It's like really take a good look at the story and go, something doesn't sound right. Maybe we better look into this.
No, but they're so intent on their virile hatred of Trump and the whole white supremacist agenda that they got lost in the sauce. Speaking of lost in the sauce, late night ratings for Colbert and Fallon and others are way down. It doesn't surprise me because when your whole shtick is based on Trump, they can get you, and that's the easy way out. Like Colbert based his whole enterprise on Trump bashing, and it was cute, it was fun, we blah blah blah, and now he's left with nothing. Almost kind of like a caricature of CNN.
For 4 years, late night television went after Trump and went after conservatives and Republicans, and like CNN and MSNBC, people went, you know what, enough is enough, and they started turning them off. And again, like, where CNN and MSNBC were shown to be promoting false news, these guys were talking about issues that didn't actually happen, that were completely misleading, and now their ratings are plummeting because of it. Basically, and I'm hoping they learn the lesson, because essentially what they did was they pushed their agenda and they underestimated the intelligence of the American public. Now the American public is looking at facts and going, oh, everything they've been saying was a lie. They told to push their agenda. I don't need to put up with this. We're turning them off.
Yeah, there's also a thing of entertainment. I hearken back to the days of Johnny Carson and even Jay Leno. I didn't think he was a rock star, but it was just vanilla. It was fun. It was, see, you're going to bed, you got to go to work. I don't want to hear this shit at 11:30 at night about, the Russia hoax, Trump, and basically people like Colbert, Fallon, they're not that talented. They took the easy way out because I think intuitively they knew it.
No, they're not that talented, but I think you're missing a key point, because political satire and political humor have always been part of late night comedy. The difference is when Johnny Carson did it, when David Letterman did it, one, they went after everybody, regardless of party, regardless of what their political beliefs were. They went after you because you were in office, period. And they were funny. They were focused on crafting jokes. When Colbert, especially, but also to a lesser extent Fallon, but just as much as Colbert, Kimmel would do this, there was real anger behind it. They weren't going for a joke. They were pushing an angry agenda. And
Agreed.
People don't want to hear that.
And I think Kimmel's one of the biggest ones that are full of shit. He used to do the Man Show, and we don't have to go what that show is about. And now he's Mr. Woke. It's like, stop this shit.
Yeah, I mean, it really is ridiculous coming from Kimmel, given that, again, for our listeners that were not familiar with the Man Show, it ran on Comedy Central for several years, and its jokes primarily consisted, it was Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla, and it was girls jumping on trampolines so you would see their breasts bouncing. They had a guy who could chug an entire mug of beer in one gulp. It was all politically incorrect, and now all of a sudden Kimmel is Captain Woke.
Yeah, exactly. It was all sophomoric nonsense, and now he's Mr. Woke. Yeah, it's all crap. So then we move on to the Fox News. Fox News Christmas tree was set on fire. And the interesting thing about that, the perpetrator might be out tonight. I think they call it arson, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, it is arson, and this was someone that was known to the New York police. He'd been charged with different crimes before. He was, I believe, a homeless person. But seriously, how deranged do you have to be to go after a Christmas tree with an American flag? I mean, this is what's setting you off: Christmas and patriotism.
I stand corrected. I think if you watched MSNBC tonight, they probably have with some of their, in quotation, special guests saying it was, outrage over supremacist society. Who even know? And a revolt against Fox. It was a crazy person. End of story. And it'll be out on bail tonight, even though it's a felony. And then we end with, I find this fascinating. I really do. Truly fascinating that lockstep with the Democratic Party was Hispanics, especially, new entries into the country. And now it's so fascinating that it's a 50-50 split. So it seems like all the constituencies that the Democrats could once bank on, including African Americans, are no longer a done deal.
No, people are fleeing the Democratic Party because they've gone too far to the left. And let's clarify this a little bit. Hispanics do not vote as a block, as Democrats always assumed. It really depends on where they're from. Hispanics who have come here from Mexico, Puerto Ricans who vote, they tended to vote Democrat. However, Hispanics that came from Cuba tended to vote Republican. Why? Because they were coming from socialism. They knew the damage it was doing, and they wanted to have nothing to do with it. Now you're having more and more people come over here from socialist countries, and they're being very vocal about the fact that, no, we do not want to go back to that. So, yeah, we are going to vote against the Democrats who are trying to promote it.
Agree. And also there's a religious aspect to this, that many Hispanics are devoutly Catholic. And when you're talking about transgender and whatever, we won't even go down the road.
It doesn't even have to go down that road. Democrats seem to feel that Catholics and Christians are the one group that it's okay to discriminate against. And in fact, in the Build Back Better bill that they're pushing through, you've heard all the Democrats talk about childcare, and it's going to pay for universal childcare. Well, in the bill, it specifically prohibits Build Back Better funds from being used at childcare that are provided by churches and faith-based organizations. So the Democrats have no problem discriminating against Catholics and Christians.
No, because they took them for granted. And they're also very non-religious. They're not big on Jews. They're not big on any people, any group of people that are religious at all. And I have to say, I'll go one step further. I believe they'll very quickly lose Muslims as well, because it goes contrary to any Muslim beliefs. The Democratic
it's
Party.
possible. I don't know. I mean, Muslims have been their pet project for the last several years, so I don't know that they're going to lose that group anytime soon, especially if the squad has their way, which I'm really hoping we see the end of a number of them in the next year's elections.
I certainly hope so. Well, Dr. Lopkin, great show. And we can be found in many places, can't we?
We can. You can catch every episode at Carnivore Radio's website as well as xvadio.com/podcasts. You can find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.